Well, the manufacturers, obviously, if they're looking to defend themselves, will always try and blame the victim or the person who got injured.
If you're injured by a defective product, what do you do? How do you get help? That's what we're going to ask the lawyer on this episode. I'm Rob Rosenthal with AskTheLawyers.com, and my guest is attorney Trent Shuping of the Warshauer Law Group in Atlanta. Trent, thank you for making some time to answer our questions today.
Hey, thank you, Rob.
This may sound like maybe even a silly question, but how do you know if a product is defective? What's the standard there?
Sure, that's a good question. Actually, it's one I get a lot. People want to know, well, how do we, if we've been hurt by this product, is there something wrong with it?
Mm-hmm.
And let me sort of give you a little bit of I'll give you two answers.
Okay.
There's a legal definition, which obviously is important, but it's maybe not always helpful sometimes to the person at home or to the loved one who knows that their family's been injured by some product. The sort of back of the napkin way that you can look at this, and I encourage people to look at it, is to think about this. It's the year 2020. Is this the type of injury that should be happening? Whether it's a consumer product, whether it's an injury in the workplace, you just simply need to look at it and think, in the year 2020, is there any excuse for someone at the workplace being able to, for instance, put their hand in a machine and wind up having the hand become trapped in the machine?
Mm-hmm.
Just as a base sort of level, even before you get to the legal definition, I don't think there's any excuse for that. Maybe there was 200 years ago, but right now, there's just simply no excuse for that. If you have some sort of consumer product in your house, if you're Instapot or Instapot-like device, your pressure cooker explodes. Again, there's just no excuse for that in the year 2020. So if someone's in that type of situation, I think that's when they might need to want to speak to a lawyer, try and find out a little bit more information about what the law says about whether a product is defective. Now, broadly speaking, the law will vary a little bit from state to state. In most places, there's going to be three sort of broad areas of product defects. And the first one is going to be a manufacturing defect. Okay. And that simply is that the product wasn't, they intended to make it a certain way and they didn't. And it failed for that reason. So, for instance, with the pressure cooker that explodes, maybe there was a release valve and they didn't, in the factory, they just didn't make it correctly. I've heard cases of products that are made overseas sometimes, and the wiring simply isn't wound tight enough and winds up creating a fire hazard. An example is, if you get something in food, you get a can of soda and there's something in there that shouldn't be. That's just a manufacturing defect. They didn't mean to, obviously, to put, the rodent in your can of Coke, but they did somehow. The second category of defective products are products that don't have appropriate warnings. And by that, there's products that don't, either on the product itself or with the instructions that come with the product, they don't give the user information to know that there's a danger there. So, for instance, we've handled cases involving heating pads and electric blankets. And they're oftentimes the cases that a heating pad will not warn the user of the dangers to them. And in those types of cases, oftentimes the user winds up getting badly burned by the heating pad. And they say, I had no idea that this product that I was able to buy at a drugstore and take home with me had the potential to create this kind of injury.
Sure.
And the third and final category of product defect is products that are just defectively designed. And that, for instance, earlier I referenced, you might have a machine in a workplace that someone's able to stick a hand in. And again, in 2020, through the course of the years, really for several decades now, we've understood that if there is an opening in a machine, people's hands are going to wind up there. And it's simple to simply, guard that away so that there's no way to do that. And a good example will be the two-handed presses that we have now, where an operator has to have a hand here and a hand here, or else the machine won't cycle. If there's a machine that an operator is going to be close enough that they can be injured, but the machine will cycle where the operator isn't in a position of safety, oftentimes that's going to be a machine that's not designed sufficiently well. That will be a defectively designed product. And the victim, the user, whoever's injured by that, is probably going to have a right to recover against the manufacturer or the designer of that machine.
I would assume, Trent, that sometimes in these cases, I'm sure the manufacturers say, oh, well, it's user error. It's not nothing wrong with our product. Is it sometimes difficult to determine whether it's a problem with the product or it's user error, or is it usually pretty clear?
Well, the manufacturers, obviously, if they're looking to defend themselves, will always try and blame the victim or the person who got injured. Now, in some cases, obviously, this may be the case. For instance, if you have a user who reads warnings, is aware of them, understands them, and chooses to disregard them, there frankly is not much that we can do to help that person. The manufacturer's probably going to have a pretty good defense.
Mm-hmm.
Likewise, if the user, for instance, makes a completely inappropriate choice into how to use a product, if you're riding your skateboard and carrying a knife, well, you're probably not going to have much of a claim against the knife manufacturer because they expect you not to ride your skateboard while wearing it. Now, oftentimes we do see that defense asserted when it's not really a valid defense. So, for instance, like I talked about with machines, and the need to guard them so that fingers don't get in there. Well, of course, it's easy to say, if you're working on a machine, if you're working on a press machine, you need to keep your machine with a blade, any kind of industrial machine, you need to keep your body parts out of it. That sounds easy to say, but the reality is that if you're working 8 hours a day, 40 hours a week, maybe more, we simply know that people are not always going to be perfect, particularly in those things that they're doing repetitively. And that's why we know that machinery needs, for instance, guards to keep your hand from getting in there. Because when you're in the 7th, 8th, 9th, 10th hour of your shift, that's where people might make mistakes. And it's the job of the manufacturers, it's the job of engineers when they're designing products to foresee that. And so we oftentimes you get into, there's a legal terminology we talk about a lot called foreseeable misuse. If it's foreseeable that someone's going to misuse a product, then the manufacturer needs to design it so that can't take place.
Gotcha.
And again, oftentimes there's categories of users as well. For instance, you might have children. So you take a fan in the summertime here in the South. Obviously, a lot of people sometimes rely on fans. And nowadays we see with most modern fans, they have a grill that keeps you so that you can't put your fingers in there. I remember growing up as a kid, my grandparents had a little portable fan like that. And it had a grill, but the holes in the grill were that big. And a child could easily stick their finger in there and perhaps even lose the finger. It had a very sharp blade on it. Fast forward to today, or really into the 80s, modern fans, even from that era, had grills that you can't put your finger in. And why do we have that? Of course, we all like to think we keep an eye on our children. We like to think our children wouldn't put their hands into a place that's dangerous for them. But at the same time, we know that if you have children, they're eventually going to get their hands in places they shouldn't. And so a designer of someone, if you're designing, for instance, a fan like that, it's going to go into people's houses, it's going to be around children. The children are eventually going to put their fingers or try and put their fingers in there. You need to guard against it.
Right.
Oftentimes we get calls about cases or people refer cases to us where whoever is the victim, whoever's been damaged by the defective product, maybe will have been told by someone, maybe by their employer, that they made a mistake or they did something wrong. But it oftentimes, when you look at it from a higher level, you realize that they were set up to fail. They were put in a position that they shouldn't have. And, the people who designed the machine, the people who made the machine could have done things to make it safe for their use, knowing that we're all humans. We're all going to make some mistakes as we use products.
That's why it's good to have somebody like yourself, an attorney, to help you look at it from that higher level, who's removed from it a little bit and help you have a different set of eyes on the situation.
Absolutely. That's what we do a lot of.
Especially when it comes to household products, if someone's injured by a household product, you mentioned the pressure cooker, the hot pots. If there's a problem with it, what are your suggestions? I assume don't immediately throw the product away. What are some suggestions you have for them in those situations?
I think what you said, Rob, that's actually the very first thing, is that if at all possible, you need to make sure you preserve whatever it was that injured you. So, whether it's a cosmetic product that causes some sort of bad reaction, burns, injury, whether it's a heating pad, anything like that, the more you or your loved ones can do to go ahead and make sure that you keep it, and you keep it in the same format it was when you used it, that's very important. Obviously, that would include not just the product itself, but also the packaging, any instructions that might have come with it, any receipts that showed where a person purchased it. The more of that you have, the better. You definitely want to make sure that you preserve that evidence.
Trent, thank you so much. Lots of great information as usual. Thank you for helping us today.
Hey, thank you for having me, Rob.
That's going to do it for this episode of Ask the Lawyer. My guest has been attorney Trent Shuping of Atlanta. If you'd like the best information, or you're ready to choose a lawyer that lawyers choose, make sure to go to askthelawyer.com first. Also, please take a sec to like, share, and subscribe to our YouTube channel by clicking below. Thanks for watching. I'm Rob Rosenthal with AskTheLawyers.com.